smart enough to win. That's how the story starts. Learning is the edge that sets your work apart. When the stakes get high and the pressure never stops, smart learning in your pocket puts your business at the top.
Welcome to the Learning Advantage, from Insight to Impact, where we're going to show how smart learning fuels real business results. I'm Deb Laurel, and I'm your host. Hello, I'm Deb Laurel, and I'm the CEO of Laurel and Associates, and I've been designing and delivering training for business impact for over 40 years. What I've noticed is that the more the world and the economy changes, the more skill development provides a competitive advantage for companies. Today, we're going to talk about creating conditions where learning happens through work, not apart from it. Companies prioritizing integrated learning see 17% higher productivity and 21% greater profitability. Brands with strong on-the-job programs achieve 218% higher income per employee. Knowledge spillovers from peers further enhance firm output. All of this is made possible when leadership teams understand and implement these concepts. I'm Deb Laurel, and I make lackluster leaders legendary. Today, join us as we speak with Andrew Jacobs, a learning strategist and organizational impact advisor whose work challenges the dominant model of workplace learning, the outer loop of training supply, program delivery, and content consumption. Andrew works with leadership teams to move into the inner loop, diagnosing the real problem, brokering across the organization, and shaping the conditions where learning happens through work itself. He is the founder of Learn Learning and has led learning, talent, and capability work across public, private, and third sector organizations, including senior roles in, we're talking about British central government, with HMRC and the Department of Health and Social Care. Andrew is a chartered fellow of the CIPD, producer of the Women Talking About Learning podcast, and writes daily at lostanddesperate.com. His work has been recognized through national industry awards for informal learning, capability development, and learning strategy. Andrew speaks globally at conferences and events about learning, leadership, and the systemic work required to build organizations that learn. So we're delighted to have Andrew. Andrew, welcome.
Delighted to be here, and thank you for that introduction. I listened to that introduction and think, wow, I'm setting some expectations up here, aren't we?
I'm sure we'll fulfill them. I have no doubt.
It's good to have a stretch and a challenge, and I love the fact that my 30 years in L&D, your 40 years in L&D, we've got 70 years experience in learning and development here between us. So we would hope to have an idea about what we're talking about.
Well, I'm going to jump right into the questions.
Please do.
When you think about learning as a competitive advantage, what does that mean in the context of your organization or your work?
I think there's some layers in that question. One of the key things I think is that we tend to focus. I talk a lot to organizations, and one of the big conversations I have is about capability. So capability equals capacity plus ability. And the better and more bottom line learning that's produced works across both of those areas. It works in the ability space, so we make people better at their job, but we also work in the capacity space, i.e. we understand the conditions that people are working in. And best and the better bottom line business performance will be a learning function that recognizes how people learn, when they learn, why they learn, and why they need it, but also when they can apply it, how they can apply it, and what good performance as a result of that learning looks like. And I think that's the shift that we're seeing now, particularly in the last 3 or 4 years, where that requirement and expectation on performance support as opposed to just training, I think is moving the sector and the profession on a bit, I think.
It's so important because learning doesn't happen in a vacuum. We don't just blue sky, well, let's give them training in this today. There's a reason for the training, and it all has to do with performance.
Well, do we deliver in a vacuum? I think there's too much delivered in a vacuum, because we've done a training course in the past, so we'll deliver a training course again. Now, whether that is fundamentally the solution to the problem, I'm not sure. And in many cases, I have conversations with people, and there's generally 4 or 5 areas that we can look at. One of them relates to skills, but actually there'll be areas around culture, structure, systems, objectives that could be just an area to look at, as much as the skills element, the ability part. That's when I talk about the brokering, and I love the way you mentioned that in the introduction. The best L&D teams broker internally with their stakeholders about whether learning is really required, and that, I think, is the where we see the better performance.
I've seen so often training designed when it's really the systems that need to be fixed. People are expecting people to do customer service, but there aren't, and the people know how to do customer service. They're just not allowed to do it because the system constraints prohibit them from doing it.
A perfect example, there's an organization that I know where they wanted to increase, I can't say what it was specifically, it was related to government, but they had to improve the speed of completion of a particular form, or completion of people standing at a desk. So they wanted to, so what they did is they got everybody to complete the form and do this form and get it completed quicker, without understanding that 50% of the people standing at the desk didn't need to do that form, they had to do another form. And this is a real world example. So what they do is they focus on getting people to complete the form as quickly as possible, and then dealing with the 50% of issues where the forms are the wrong form to have been completed, and then require further work in the future. And it's that combination of focusing on the small problem rather than the bigger picture, and focusing on the behavior rather than the system, which is what gets us into trouble. And this is why people say, well, we tried training and it didn't work, because it wasn't the solution that was needed.
Jane Vella has some steps to learning design, and one of the first ones is why. Who are we training? Why? What does it need? Does it make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Our second question, can you share a specific example where a learning initiative moved from insight to real impact, and how you measured that impact?
So I'll talk about one which probably isn't even a learning issue. Let's throw this in there and see what we think. So I was working with a local council in London, so a local city authority, who have refuse workers, and their refuse workers weren't permanent. They worked on an agency basis, and they might work for 3 or 4 weeks with this organization, then go and work in another part of the city, and then they will come back to this organization again. And one of the challenges you've got is, how do you train and support those workers on how the different machinery works? Because they've got 3 or 4 different kinds of wagons, that are collecting 5 or 6 different kinds of bins and so on. So I was asked to produce some e-learning, which to me didn't make sense, because we could sit there, design some e-learning, which would look great, be flashy, lovely primary colors, but these guys would have to come in at extra time to sit at a computer where they didn't have a login to complete an e-learning, which they're going to forget. So what we did is we invested the money. Instead of buying some e-learning, we bought some mobile phones, and we put the mobile phones with holders and charging cables onto the wagons. And we got the guys themselves to tell us what were the things that they needed to know, and it would be the first checks in the morning, the making sure that you're able to empty it, making sure you're able to use the compressor to close to push the thing together, for example, how to operate the lifts at the back and so on. And we got them to work out what they were and then to make their own videos, which was saved on the mobile phones. And those mobile phones were then saved on the appliances. And there was a win two ways round, because all of a sudden, these refuge workers now had mobile phones and cell phones, which they could communicate with the base. They could communicate with each other. If an incident happened, they were able to take photos and video of the thing happening straight away. Plus, it didn't matter who was on the truck. Everybody had, in the moment, just for me, just enough learning at the point of need of how this appliance worked.
That's fantastic. Oh, I love it.
This is where it's a brilliant example of capability. So I could skill the people, but actually, where's the capacity around how they work? So the conversation was about, well, what are they expected to do? They expected to perform. So what's the performance metrics? So how do we support the performance metrics? What's the relationships that have to exist? So we've got guys who are in roles that are on a semi-permanent basis. So we don't need to bog them down with lots of stuff. They want something short that suits them there and then, but we need something permanent. So we just had to think about the problem in a different way. And that's the way that we try and encourage people to think about learning. Does it have to be done in that way at that point in time? From a knowledge working perspective, particularly for someone who's working in a skills job or skill working perspective.
And the whole idea of taking folks who are not at a desk, who don't have a computer, and saying, we're going to sit you down in front of an e-learning program makes absolutely no sense. So I love the solution. That's marvelous.
I really hope that people watching this don't suddenly go, well, it wouldn't work in my organization. That's not the case. What I want you to do is, how could I adapt that to my organization? That's the way you need to be thinking about it.
Yes, absolutely. So what do you see as the biggest barrier preventing organizations from fully embracing lifelong learning, and how do you think we can overcome it?
So there's a barrier in the question, because you talk about lifelong learning. I think there's life-wide learning. So I've been a school governor. I was a school governor, so education board, 17 years. I did loads of stuff there that would never have been picked up. And I learned a load, particularly about finance, Excel, spreadsheets, compliance issues that I learned from there that I would never have learned within the organizations I was in. So I think there's something to do with life-wide as much as lifelong. There's something to do with the bureaucracy we build around learning. There's a Seth Godin, the marketeer, in one of his books or one of his blogs, he says that bureaucracy is the scaffolding of success. And we see this in learning and development a lot. Something is successful, and so we build a bureaucracy around it, because that's what success was like. So we run a program. Onboarding is a beautiful example of this. We run an onboarding program, which is incredibly successful when people start joining an organization. And 8, 10, 12 years later, we're still running the same onboarding program, but with different layers of bureaucracy added to it as other things have been successful. To then suggest that you have to do something differently in terms of onboarding, people will push back against it, because we have success built around that. And if we take away that onboarding bureaucracy, the success will fall. And so there's something to do with understanding what activities we're doing and why we're doing them, and not be afraid to lose some of these shibboleths and take them away and go, actually, they're not needed, and be afraid to try something a little bit different. There's very much a mindset of, that's what we've done before, so that's what we'll do now. I think the bigger challenge we have now, particularly, is just in terms of technology. And everybody talks about tech and AI and so on. Just something for the people watching. If you take on a school leaver now who just left school, they're younger than the iPhone. So they have existed their entire life with mobile communication and just for me, just enough, just in time content available to them. If you think that you can do what you did 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago when you started working within those systems and expect your employees to behave the same way, that's not going to last. That's not going to work.
No question. No question. So we have to change the mindset.
I can't change people's mindset, which is something I'm really clear on. There's a lovely phrase someone said to me once, which is, you change minds one heart at a time, which I think is a beautiful description of it. You have to understand that I want to change and do things differently before I do them differently. One of the challenges we have, particularly when we look at the diffusion of innovation, Rogers and Christensen talk about diffusion of innovation, there are factors that limit it. And one of them is people can't see other people doing it. And they don't have the authority or the motivation to want to do it because they can't see other people. People need to see other people doing things differently before they recognize that they can do it differently. So for the people watching, really important to recognize that I might want to change people's mindsets, but I need to show them how they can do it.
Which is why we talk about having pilots, having change advocates and working with them.
Pilots never fail. Pilots only ever have degrees of success. And that's something that we fall down on a lot. Something I would be very careful of is I would never give anybody a title of champion or change agent. What I would do is find the people in the organization who are already the change agents. So the people who have what Julian Stodd calls social authority rather than hierarchical authority, because those people are the people who have influence, and those are the people you really need to be engaged with. So who are the influencers, and get them on your side.
Absolutely. What are the top 3 challenges you will be struggling with in 2026?
Whoa, that's a great question. That's a great question. Challenges in 2026. So there's an ongoing one to do with measurement, which is beginning to shift. I'm seeing more movement in people understanding it's about performance as opposed to, counting. There's a difference between counting, measurement, evaluation. Counting is what we're really good at, the number of people who've done something. Measurement is looking at that data and looking to a yardstick. Our yardsticks are changing. Previously, we looked at the quality of the learning. Now we're beginning to look at the quality of the performance. The evaluation is the next step on. There's still a piece of work that has to happen in that space. The second one, I think, is to do with technology. And that is about the use of AI, but not in the way that we think about it. For me, we have a really strange relationship with AI right now. It reminds me of mobile phones in the 90s, where we used to bring your own device to work, BYOD. Now it's done. Bring your own device. Everybody takes their own device to work. Whereas in the 90s, early 2000s, we didn't do that. And access to mobile devices was limited in the workplace. That changed. And they become ubiquitous. We've got a similar issue now with AI, where we have organizations locking down AI tools. And we have the example, which I spoke with somebody recently, where they'll sit there on the tube or the subway or the train on the way into work, and they will use ChatGPT and Claude and Mistral and Gemini and all of these tools on the way into work. Will then not use those tools at work, and will then use those tools on the way home from work. So we have So you talk about lifelong learning and life-wide, we have a really interesting challenge on, well, how are we going to adapt to that? The third challenge is, I think, something which isn't just learning development related. I wrote about this a few weeks ago. There's a strategic ambiguity in the workplace at the moment, where all of the elements of PESTLE, political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental, are currently turned up to 11. to use the Spinal Tap reference. So politically, in the US and across Europe, politically it's more charged than it has been for some time. Economically, we are still paying back the furlough schemes and so on post-pandemic, and economically the world is in a very interesting place in terms of how that's shifting. Socially, we've got different expectations from people joining our workforce and as a population. Legally, we're seeing legal change and challenge in the nature of how we work. Technologically, I've mentioned AI. Environmentally, there's the environmental impact of the work we're doing. All of those are hyper turned up to 11. And I think in 2026, we're going to see some of them are going to shift the dial in the way we work in a different way. And as a consequence, there will be a shift in the way we learn as well.
Do you have some sense of what that shift will be?
I think there's a few already where I'm just in the last couple of days, I've seen, for example, we're looking at the nature of work and people attending an office, where people are now being checked for time in office as much as actually attending an office. So there's something to do with the relationship between people and work. I think that's going to come to a head. We're going to see more in terms of how the technology companies are using AI. It's just been released in the last day or so from today's date that Apple don't use their own AI for their own AI tools for Siri. They actually rely on Google. So that takes us back to that 90s thing again, where we had all these mobile phone operating systems. We had Symbian, we had BlackBerry, we had a Nokia pre-Symbian, we had Motorola. Everybody had their own operating system. But actually what they did is they then got together and you ended up with the Google system and the Apple system. I think we're going to see something similar within the AI space. Now, is that going to happen this year? Maybe, maybe not, but we are going to see a consolidation. So ChatGPT, for example, are part of Microsoft. Will that continue in the same way that it has done? Will we see a further integration between GPT and Microsoft potentially? Are we going to see further integration between Google's AI products? Or are they going to spin Gemini out separately? Or are they going to give Gemini to Apple or charge a higher subscription, etc.? There's lots of AI integration, I think, is going to happen. And what we just need to do is be aware that stuff is happening around us. The worst thing to do would be to not engage with those tools now, because something might happen. Better is to engage with the tools now so we're prepared for when something does happen.
In your view, what's one outdated belief about corporate learning that we need to let go of, and what should replace it?
Completion equals compliance. That's my absolute favorite. Hands up everybody who's done an e-learning module. Yay. Hands up what difference it made to, it's made change to your work. No hands, because it's not. There's a friend of mine, a guy called Andy Lancaster, used to be the head of learning at the CIPD, and he said to me once, and I've always remembered this, is that we should give our compliance learning to the audit team. And I think that would make absolute perfect sense. So all of your audit learning is managed by the compliance, or all of your compliance learning is managed by the audit team, because then it's not about learning, then it's about ticking boxes, and we can get on and do all the really good stuff then. Wouldn't that be nice?
It would be lovely. That whole butts and seats.
There's Donald Clark. There's a guy over here in the UK, a guy called Donald Clark. He said before, if you're measuring the bum on the seat, you're measuring the wrong end of the person.
Amen.
Absolutely.
How are you leveraging data, technology, or new learning methods to create more personalized and effective learning experiences?
I'm really keen on understanding how we use data. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Proving Impact, which is about understanding that data, information, knowledge, wisdom pyramid, and actually understanding what data we can access. Too often in learning and development, we focus on what I call the input and output data. We focus on the who should attend, when they should attend, how long they're there for, what they complete, who do they share it with, what did they score, what's their reflection afterwards. And that's all input and output data. That's learning data. We can capture that as learning functions. And if anybody wants to get in touch with me, feel free. And I can point them in the direction of the book, and I can show them where this stuff is. The most important stuff is actually not input and output, but outcome and impact. And those are so what happened as a result and what effects were created. So that means looking at data in a different way. So a good example of this was managing sickness in an organization. They wanted sickness training for their managers. They wanted their managers to be tougher on sickness, and they wanted them trained on how to use it. And we had a look and realized it was actually a system issue, that managers knew how to do the interviews, but actually they didn't know how to access it on the system. So we put a GIF together. We just found 6 screenshots, put them together, annotated it, sent it out to managers, and went, just make sure you know how to use the system. It got shared 1,000 times. We know it got shared because we put a hashtag on it, and we found it going through Teams that had been shared using a hashtag. So we could see where it had been shared and where it had been used. We had an enormous increase in the amount of people who were now sick. So the HRI systems went through the roof. Terrible people were telling us. No, it's not. It was perfect because it showed that people realized that they could do this, that they could do things differently. They just needed more help. So it's understanding the data isn't about the learning stuff, but it's about the performance stuff. Grievances went through the roof. However, long-term absence was better managed. They had improvements in terms of disability and being able to manage disabilities. So they had a really interesting narrative that they were able to spin around it just by doing something differently, but looking at the data in a different way. We could quite easily have run a training course and everybody could have attended it and nothing would have changed. The only thing that people might have remembered is if we'd done a demo of logging into the system. So we got rid of all the stuff outside it and just did the how to log into the system. And then that created all of the other stuff that came around it.
Oh, that's fascinating. Just brilliant things. I'm enjoying this so much. I'm learning so much.
To me, this is modern learning. That I have this it's brilliant to chat with you, Deb. But I'm happy to speak to people. Anybody wants to get in contact, and more than happy, connect with me on LinkedIn and so on. I'm more than happy to chat about this stuff because, to me, this is the difference between modern learning and becoming obsolete. We will become obsolete as a function if all we do is produce stuff, because AI tools can produce it quicker now. How much do we pay for a learning designer? 50,000 a year, something like that. For $20 £20 a month, I can buy a subscription to ChatGPT. I can buy it to an image generator, a video generator, etc., etc. I could train 5 people on how to use those tools, and they will be able to use those tools way better than one learning designer. We'll become obsolete if we don't think that we can do things in a different way. We will be engaged for our critical thought and our creative thought. Is what I call heavy thinking. Heavy thinking is being able to think creatively around problems and being able to be critical and think critically around problems. That's what we can do. Leave the other stuff to the AI tools and let's be involved in critical and creative thought. Don't give that to the AI tools. Keep that for us and use the AI tools in a way to get the light stuff done.
We haven't talked a lot about what you mean about learning in the work. And I thought you should have some chance to discuss that.
So learning in the flow of work is getting out of the way. All too often I end up having conversations with people who want to produce Netflix style learning platforms where people have to go to. My experience is people don't search how do I learn how to. What they search is how do I. And what we need to do as a learning function is reposition our learning so that they come to us when there is a need. In learning development, I talk about the just-ins a bit. So just-in-case learning. And we're very good at designing just-in-case learning within workplace learning. It's that mandated, required, etc. kind of stuff that we do to people just in case something happens. Then we're covered. Then we move to just-in-time learning. So just-in-time learning is where we got stuck about 30 years ago, where we produce e-learning modules which people can access at a time which suits us, but it's easily scalable and so on. But again, that's still our data. It's still in our workhouse, and we still control it. What our users want is just for me learning. And like I said, we've got a generation who've walked in with a mobile phone. I can look anything up in the world that I want to on that right away. And just for me, I can tailor it just for me. And we need to think about what that personalization looks like. So that's actually then saying, you know your job. However, on the basis of the 1,000 people we know who do the job in a similar way, these are the kind of things that matter. So that's what we're going to put in front of you, not as a hurdle, but as support if you need it. So that's where it needs to be in terms of supporting people in the flow of work. The important thing, the most important element, though, is the fourth element, which actually has come about through technological change in the last few years and also post-pandemic, which is people look beyond just for me learning, and now they look for just enough learning. And by that, I mean, I'll take the example of an Excel course. You and I probably both went on Microsoft Excel courses at some point in the past, Deborah, where we sat in a room and people told us how to use Microsoft Excel. If someone wants to know how to use Excel now, they will just type into Google, how do I create a pivot table? And it will take them to the video at that point in the video where the person is talking about pivot tables. So the need for the learning function to produce training courses around Excel has been diminished. And what we should be doing is showing people how to find, how do I approaches to things. And this is where the AI piece is really important, because somebody might not even know that they need a pivot table. They might be working in somewhere and they've never even heard of the term pivot table. They know what they want to produce, but they don't quite understand how to ask for it. This is where the AI tools are really smart now. So I can say to an AI tool, I have some data. This is what I think it tells me. I would like to be able to analyze this. Can you explain it to me as if I'm 14 years old, what I need to do in Microsoft Excel? And it will do that for you. And that's where we need to sit as a learning function, showing people how to use the tools better in the flow of their work, rather than take them out of it to sit there for 6 hours learning how to use Microsoft Excel when maybe 30 seconds of what we cover is actually of use to them. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Absolutely.
Welcome to my head. It's the kind of stuff I think about.
Well, it's brilliant stuff. If you could give one piece of advice to leaders who want to build a true culture of continuous learning or wide learning, what would it be?
Okay. So the first thing I would not do is give advice, because I don't understand their context. And that's something that we fall down on very often in L&D. We want to tell everybody how to do their job, but we don't understand the context they're working in. Content is king, context is kingdom. So what I would be doing is asking them, what is this culture of learning that you want? And actually, it probably already exists. What exists is a culture of learning that isn't what you recognize probably within the organization. But I can't say you need to do this or do that to make it happen, because it's one, probably already there, and two, just by me saying it isn't going to make it change. What you need to do is to go and find out what it looks like for you and your organization, and two, how much of that already exists. So I wouldn't give advice. I'd tell them to go and ask. I'd ask them.
It really does ultimately depend on them. So culture and whether learning is important or not.
It totally depends on the industry. So I've worked in a range of industries. In my past, I've been a butcher. I've also worked in the fire service. Now, tell me about manual handling in those two organizations. Totally different. Yeah, they're the same themes in terms of how you lift stuff, but I guarantee you that health and safety in the fire service is totally different from health and safety in butchery. It definitely is. I know that. contexts are so different. We'd never dream of giving health and safety advice like that. So why do we assume that we can give other advice in the same way? It totally has to be context driven.
Okay. Last question. What's one book, resource, or learning experience that has had a lasting impact on you personally?
Okay. So there's an author. He's a professor of innovation and creativity who goes by the name of Alf Rehn, Alfrehn, and he's written a couple of books. But there was one that he wrote, and the title escapes me. Give me 5 seconds, everybody. I'm just going to look up the title of the book. I've read it about 6 times. Dangerous Ideas, it's called. When provocative thinking is your most dangerous asset. If you use Amazon, you can get it from there for about 99 cents, 99 pence. It's no money at all. I've read it about 6 times, and he fundamentally challenged my thinking around what I thought creativity was about. So up until 2009, 2010, I was your typical corporate trainer. I thought everything was about brainstorms and get people in a room and so on. And I read his book and realized that I was doing it all wrong. That it wasn't about me, the sage on the stage at the front of the room. It was all about how we can actually dive in and use the creativity of the people who are in the rooms with us. And I go back and look at elements of that book on a regular basis, because it's forced me to think completely differently about what I thought being creative was about.
Oh, I'll have to look at it. I'm not familiar with that book.
He's an amazing speaker, and he's very out there. He is very non-typical. Let's put it that way. You're not going to sit there and go, that was all right. You're either going to strongly agree or strongly disagree. You don't tend to get a bland score it out of 5. It's a 3 with Alf stuff. It's a very interesting guy. And yeah, I strongly recommend people have a read of what he's done. Look at some of his videos and listen to some things he's done as well.
I definitely will. Thank you for that.
You're
So
welcome.
is there anything that you would like to add?
One other thing we've not talked about is, which I should really talk about, is the benefit of audio. I have a big microphone. I have a good voice. I produce podcasts. I think audio and learning together are absolutely made for each other. And I hear lots of conversations with organizations where they go, we're going to produce a video. I would guarantee the people in the organization are listening to the video and have switched tabs and are working while that is still playing. So one thing I would suggest to people to do is don't diminish the use of audio only as a learning tool. It's something that I'm investigating. I'm doing lots of stuff in audio. I produce podcasts in organizations, and it is having a real distinct effect in how people are learning. And you can use it in loads of different ways. You run a leadership cohort, bring them together 3 weeks later, record it as an audio, edit it, put some really good sound on it, and you turns into both a reflective session for that group and 2, a piece of content for the next cohort in terms of expectations. For example, that's how you can use some of this stuff. And I think there's some interesting conversations to be had around how we use audio in learning.
Not to argue with you at all. I don't learn audibly. I need to see something. I need to read it. So this speaks to certain learning preferences.
I understand that absolutely. About 30% of the people in the world are listening to podcasts every month. So if 30% of your employees are using a channel, why don't we look and see how we can exercise and use that channel? That to me is just how it makes sense. We talk about engagement. We talk about wanting engagement with people. I mentioned the person sitting there on the tube using Bring Your Own AI and using, Chat GPT. They're probably listening to a podcast. What if they were listening to a podcast related to learning or your business or some of the challenges that you've got relating to your work? It's a very different approach to how people might learn.
Yes. Okay. Now, for people to get in touch with you, Andrew, what are the best ways for them to do it?
So the easiest way is through LinkedIn. That's the way that I connect with pretty much everybody around the world. Alternatively, they can email me, and that's andrew@larn, LLARN.com. Or they can find our website, larn.com, LLARN.com, and find the details there. I'm always happy to have a chat with people. If people just want to go, here, you said about XYZ and I disagree, fine, come and talk to me. I'd love to hear people disagree with me, because it proves my thinking and makes me think more deeply about some of this stuff. I love the fact you say that some of my thinking's brilliant. It's not. To me, it's common sense, just from thousands of conversations I've had with people in the past, and it's those conversations that just help and improve my thinking. So if people want to connect with me, I'd be delighted to chat with you.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on this LinkedIn Live program. I have learned an enormous amount, and I am really impressed with the comments and insights that you have. As we have discussed, Learning Advantage.
I was going to say, that's very kind of you, Deborah. Thank you.
You're welcome. We've talked about how training can have an impact, and how thinking about training and what it needs to do and why it needs to be there and how it can be applied in systemic ways as opposed to just content in and content out has been fascinating. If you want to learn how to have an impact on your organization through training, contact Laurel and Associates for a no obligation consultation. We do make lackluster leaders legendary, and we look forward to having you join us next week when we have Tabitha Barron, the founder of Keep Your Kids Safe and Keep Your Seniors Silver. So thank you for joining us, and please join us again next week. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Learning Advantage from Insight to Impact. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week.
Every lesson, every workshop, every failed attempt you save becomes a map upon the desktop. Show